Good afternoon to you. 406 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4:30, we'll get an update on the state of America's military with Rob Greenway, a national security expert at the Heritage Foundation. Their big list on the military strength is out. We'll talk to him about that. Garrett Ziegler is here at 5 o'clock, the man who published Hunter Biden's laptop to the internet. We'll get an update from him on his legal battle with Hunter. Nathan Brinkman is also here at 5:30. We talk school choice with him on this school choice week, and you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Standoff at the southern border. Texas is not backing down. They are extending the mileage of border barriers they are erecting, concertina wire, to block illegal foreign nationals from pouring into the country. They're doing their best. The federal government's saying to stop doing that, and in fact is trying to cut through that wire. The Biden administration gave Texas a deadline of today to give the feds full access to all of this area to, of course, bring more illegals into the country. For more on this whole saga, I want to bring in Tom Homan now. He's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and the former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Tom, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay. First of all, did you ever expect we'd get to this point where the states are the only ones trying to protect the border and the feds are trying to open it up?
No, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, it's been over 3 years. Now the White House says they're trying to come to some resolution. They're trying to, they want the Republicans to come to the table. But bottom line is they have the plan. Congress passed H.R. 2 months ago. H.R. 2 is proven effective because most of Trump's policies. If they want to secure the border, like they're saying, like the White House spokesman said, they want to secure the border, well, they have H.R. 2 passed by the House, have the Senate pass it, and have the president sign it. But no, I never thought we'd get to the point where we're going to have a state taking on the federal government. But you know what? God bless Greg Abbott. I think he should keep his head down and keep going.
What do you make of 25 Republican governors linking arms with him yesterday and announcing they all support him and they're going to give them state resources to help out with securing the border?
I think it's awesome. Look, again, this isn't just about illegal immigration anymore, right? We got over 112,000 dead Americans with fentanyl. We got over 1,700 dead migrants have crossed the border.
Yes.
We got a record number of no suspected terrorists across the border. We got a record number of gotaways, just shy of 2 million. I mean, we're at the point, this is the biggest national security failure I've seen since 9/11. So I'm glad the states are sticking together and taking the federal government on because they have refused to do their job.
Thanks this week, the Biden administration is under pressure from a variety of Democrat members of Congress, as well as the news media. One reporter very aggressively today in the White House, urging the White House to federalize the Texas National Guard to take them away from Texas in order to aid and abet the opening of America's borders even more. What do you think of this idea?
Well, look, I think the governor should do everything he can. I think Article 1, Section 6 gives us full authority. And look, this administration is not going to shut down the cartel because why? Because the Mexican government is corrupt. The Mexican government is bought off by the cartels. I'm not saying every Mexican official is corrupt. I'm not saying every Mexican military or law enforcement is corrupt, but many of them are. I've worked for 30 years. And the bottom line is the only people that are going to be shut these cartels down and shut the fentanyl down is President Trump getting back in office. He will take the cartels on. It will have to count on our intelligence program. It's going to count on our special ops program. The only way we're going to take them down is with a strong president, and this president's not going to do it. The president of Mexico, every meeting they have, the president of Mexico is telling Biden what he wants, what he's demanding. Not once have I seen Biden make any demand from the Mexican president.
But the idea that the federal government would take control of Texas's National Guard, under normal circumstances, if a president is to do that at all, it's to restore order, to bring about peace, to protect the country. The idea here seems to be that if Biden takes over the Texas National Guard, it's to allow more illegal foreign nationals to pour across the border.
No, I think that'll be a court fight. I don't think Governor Abbott's going to let them take over the National Guard. I mean, the bottom line is the Governor Abbott is trying to secure the border, not only protect Texas, but protect the United States.
Right.
We're at a point now where we got national security threats coming across that border. So Texas is doing the job the federal government should be doing, that they're supposed to be doing. And like I said, in 3 years, you can't show this administration's done one damn thing to slow the flow. Everything they have done is send more resources to the border to process quicker and release quicker. They haven't done one thing to slow the flow. So I'm glad Governor Abbott's stepping up. I'm glad 20 state governors are with him. And I'm looking forward. I think there'll be a battle Worth fighting, because this is the future of this country. And like I said, the biggest national security failure I've seen in this nation since 9/11. I thought we learned our lesson at 9/11, but apparently a lot of people didn't. So Governor Abbott's doing the right thing. And I told Governor Abbott he needs help. If he needs help on securing the border and he wants some policy help, I volunteer to go out there and do whatever I can to help him. We'll bring the whole Trump team to him to help him.
The Border Patrol unions say that their membership, or at least they actually say that the rank and file of the Border Patrol support Texas. You obviously know a lot of these guys, sir. What is your impression of how the Border Patrol feel about this?
Border Patrol's loving it because they consider Texas DPS a force multiplier. While they took over that one area, Border Patrol was able to release a lot of agents to cover the areas they're not able to patrol. So they're able to catch more of the gotaways. They're able to seize more of the fentanyl, because instead of being an Uber driver, instead of being a welcoming committee and a tourist agent, what Texas does is actually more of the Border Patrol agents hit the front line. The line agents with the United States Border Patrol is 100% behind the governor of Texas.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. This week, there was a letter released by a variety of former FBI, Homeland Security, and law enforcement officials indicating that they think the threats to the country right now because of the southern border are as extreme as they've seen them. You've been talking about how this is the biggest threat since 9/11 in your view. Do you think many people who understand the national security of our country share that view, who work for the government now?
Absolutely. I've been calling a national security crisis for over 2 years, and I'm glad that FBI agents came forward to say the same thing. You know, the bottom line is, Border Patrol, here's what the listeners need to know. The Border Patrol arrested people from 181 different countries. Some of these countries are sponsored for terror. Right. Again, they arrested over 300 trying to sneak into the country on the southern border alone. So how many just shy of 2 million people come from the country sponsoring terror? If you think it's zero, then you're a moron not paying attention to the data. Again, no one can convince me terrorist cells haven't crossed that wide open border. Why would they take a chance on trying to get a visa or airline ticket like 9/11 terrorists did when they know they're going to be vetted? There's a lot of vetting programs now. When you can simply go to Mexico, pay the cartels a little bit extra money, and be one of those 1.9 million gotaways.
There was a bill that was being negotiated in the Senate that apparently earlier this week was killed because of pressure from the former and perhaps future president of the United States, Donald Trump. The idea here is that there was an amnesty bill being worked up in the Senate, a bill designed to hamstring a future Trump administration from getting control of the border. That effort has apparently been killed. How relieved were you to hear that?
I'm very relieved. But I think President Trump understands that what the Biden administration wants is just more money to send more billions of dollars to the NGOs to transport people all over the United States. President Trump understands this is not a money issue; it's a policy issue. So I thank President Trump for stepping in here, because I think he's got a lot of influence over a lot of people on Hill I think are weak. Look, we got Senate Republicans negotiating with Alejandro Mayorkas. That's like negotiating with an arsonist how to put out a fire, for God's sakes. Yeah. So, God bless President Trump for stepping up and making his influence known, because I think I think we're at the point where if they're not willing to shut the border down and pass H.R. 2 in the Senate, then shut it down. At what point? How many dead Americans do we got to have? How many dead migrants do we got to have? How many known suspected terrorists do we got to have until we say enough's enough and take a stand?
When you say shut it down, do you think that they should stop funding the government entirely until this border gets secured?
Yes.
Yeah.
And President Trump did it once before, and I tell you what, we're at the point now, again, a big national security issue. I'm telling you, at what point do we take a stand and tell this administration, you know how to shut this border down? All you got to do is dust off the Trump policies. Put the Remain in Mexico program back in. The highest court in the land says that's legal. Unabolish the third safe country agreement and stop catch and release. The federal law clearly says under Title 8, an arriving alien without proper documentation shall be detained. Not maybe, not we'll think about it, shall. Stop catch and release, put the Remain in Mexico program back in, and that'd be a game changer for this administration. Force them to do it.
Lastly, sir, and again, Tom Homan, thank you as always for your time. On your concern about the threats, I do find myself worrying each day, unfortunately, that I hope that headline doesn't come through that we were just subjected to a major terror attack by virtue of this open border. But it does feel like with each passing day we get closer to that. How concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned. I've done this for, 35 years. I've never been more scared, and I mean that, scared about the safety and security of this nation, I am right now.
Tom Homan, man who's served and very well in the immigration mission of the United States, and will do it again if given the opportunity very soon. Tom Homan, thank you very much, sir. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you.
All right, that's, again, Tom with the Heritage Foundation and the former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, there was a caller earlier who called, and I didn't get a chance to get to him yet, given the tons of news that we've had, but was upset, my read, at least whatever, I'm going to take it and go with it. My read is just being upset with these Republicans, especially in the Senate, who've been so spineless on so many on this issue and so many others. And I agree. I've been really annoyed by that. But it does give me an opportunity to tell you about something that Sean Davis over at The Federalist expressed this week, which I found really thought-provoking and important. You know, it wasn't until the 17th Amendment that the United States Senate was elected directly by voters in the individual states. Prior to that, it was the state legislatures who would choose who represented each state in the United States Senate. By design, the founders made it that way. And in fact, Sean Davis points out that this saga right now, the one that we are staring at, is a perfect expression of why the founders built it that way in the first place. Here's what he wrote. He said, look at the difference in how individual states are responding to the border invasion compared to how the Senate is responding. The states rightly see a massive threat to their own sovereignty and security, but most senators don't care, says Sean. And that is a perfect illustration of why the 17th Amendment, which eliminated the right of state legislatures to appoint their own representatives in Washington, was such a disaster. Congress was designed to represent the two most important sovereign entities in America, the people and the states. The House would be elected by the people and represent their interests. The Senate would be elected by the states and represent their interests. States no longer have any representation in Washington. The House still represents the people, but the modern Senate really only represents the lobbyists and the industries who pay to put those senators in office every 6 years. So why would senators like McConnell and Romney and Young feel so comfortable giving their states the middle finger on issue after issue after issue? Why is McConnell so much more interested in pushing Ukraine funding and open borders amnesty? Because the very mechanism designed by the founders to keep corrupt people like McConnell in check was gutted by the 17th Amendment, Sean writes. He's accountable only to Boeing and Raytheon and the Chamber of Commerce because it's their money that keeps him in office. His anger today at not being able to get away with lying to everyone about his plan to keep the border open is a function of him not being used to states asserting their own authority. He's not used to being told what to do by the people who pay this nation's bills, and it infuriates him. By all means, let's keep it up, says Sean. Isn't that great? It is, and it's unfortunate it takes a crisis like this, but this is the worthwhile reminder. And boy, everything about that feels so true. That too many of these senators are captured by these special interests who are paying for their reelection campaigns, rather than to be responsive to the individual needs of their states if they were actually elected by those state legislatures still. And they're not. They're not. And it has exposed a massive corrupt problem in our system that is not actually serving the people of the United States as a result. John is in Fairfax line 2. It was John, it was your call that made me think of this. But John, go ahead, sir. You're on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm glad to get back on with you. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm upset that it's come down to this, that our federal government actually is more interested in taking care of illegal immigrants than their own citizens.
Right.
And I was telling your call screener there that if every Republican in our country right now does not stand up and stand with Texas, then they don't have a spine. And that goes for like you just said, Mitch McConnell, Romney, all of them. Because right now, this is the breaking point in our country. And if these guys don't stand up, then they're basically just paying lip service. And we have every right as American citizens, and I fought for my country for 20 years, every right to stand up for our country, to defend it if our government has failed us.
This is the easiest one. This is the easiest one, John.
They have failed us.
How hard is it to take up for Texas here? How hard is it to take up for the Constitution and the country here? It's the easiest one. It's a slow pitch softball, big fat one right over the plate. Just swing and hit. That's all we're asking you to do. It's very easy, and yet they still resist. So too many. Although I will say, I started the show today. There is some encouragement out there, John. There are Republicans who are standing up here. It's good to see these governors do it. I hope it's more than just sternly worded letters. They really have to put their money where their mouth is and bring about some sovereignty, and defend the Constitution. This is one of those moments. This calling out to them. They should answer it.
Well, every time that a Republican is on television, they should be preaching about this and saying that we stand in solidarity with Texas, including Mitch McConnell, who's supposed to be the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. He's doing nothing. He's doing nothing, Vince. You know that. Yeah. And we've got laws like Tom Homan said. God bless Tom Homan. We've got laws. They just got to enforce them, and that's
exactly right. We don't need new laws. We have perfectly good laws that they're not enforcing. They're just breaking them. Thanks, John. All right, a lot of military guys in the audience. You may be interested in hearing this. What's the state of America's military? How are we doing? How do we stack up against the rest of the world's militaries? The Heritage Foundation's been charting this for years. Their new study just out. Rob Greenway joins us with the results moments from now. Well, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Nathan Brinkman will be joining us. That's at 5:30. We talk school choice with him. That's ahead. I was just laughing to myself that Joe Biden, the Babylon Bee, has a great headline up, as they so often do. Biden says Texas has till end of day to remove razor wire or else Fuller Bagazaka and Doorbell Leopard. Which I love. It's just a perfect headline. Perfect headline from the Babylon Bee. I do have a brief update on that real quick for you, that the Border Patrol is now indicating that they have no plans to remove any of the razor wire set up by Texas amid its feud with the Biden administration. That's according to Fox News, just reporting this here in the last half hour. These are officials with the Border Patrol proper, separate and distinct from the Border Patrol union, saying, no, they are going to leave the concertina wire in place and will only be going through it if they have an emergency, a medical emergency of some kind. That was already the agreement they had with Texas. So that's interesting. I don't know if this is Biden blinking or the Border Patrol saying, hey, we're just sitting this one out. We're on Texas's side because they're helping us out a lot. But fascinating developments there. So that's the latest on that issue, and I'll bring you more as it comes up during the show. Rob Greenway is here. He's the director of the Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation. And Heritage is just out with one of its most important and interesting reports released each year. Rob, good to have you with us, sir.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much for having me.
So the Heritage Foundation each year releases this index of military strength. Give us a sense of what it assesses and what you found.
You bet. For 10 years, we've provided this report card, essentially, of our armed forces. We look at really four things. We look at the threats to U.S. interests. We look at the operating environment at which we'd have to face them and confront them around the world. We look at our armed forces collectively and their capability and capacity to meet those threats. And lastly, we also address our partners because obviously they play a role in it. And the story we've told consistently for 10 years using the same comprehensive evaluation and consistent measurement is the threat environment is increasing and our capacity to address those threats is declining to a very concerning level. In fact, the last 2 years, we judge our armed forces at being weak.
It's unfortunate to hear. So I want to talk about some of the primary components here. The threat environment. Let's begin there. What does the threat environment look like, and how has it changed?
Well, I think no need to remind you and your listeners that the world's situation is deteriorating in front of our very eyes,
yes.
And at a rapid clip the last 2 years because of the Biden administration's policy. So whether it's the open borders here at home, or whether it's a land war in Europe and the Russian invasion of Ukraine that they failed to deter and haven't been able to conclude, or it's the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and now the Hamas attack on Israel of October the 7th and the escalation that includes firing U.S. ships at the Red Sea on a daily basis and attacks against our forces in Iraq and Syria on an hourly basis. while we're funding Iran and its terrorist surrogates and proxies to do it. And then you look at the increasing threat from North Korea and their ballistic missile and nuclear program, and the threat in the South China Sea from an increasingly emboldened and aggressive China. No matter where you look, or I could add Venezuela claiming territory from its neighbor Guyana. No matter where you look around the compass, things are getting worse, and they're getting worse at a faster pace, and that affects our ability to address threats, no question. Yeah,
the problems are all over the place. And as you mentioned, our border, I mean, the cartels have never been more empowered, and the threats to the country and the American lives that are being lost are very real right now.
Oh, there's no question. Yes, over 3 million crossings at the border. You know, how many thousands of special interest aliens coming from places like the Middle East, or military-age males from China. The drug cartels, as bad a problem that is, resulting in 100,000 deaths a year for the last 2 years from fentanyl-related overdoses,
yes,
has a Chinese origin at the end of the day. All of this, of course, is opening it up to threats that we face around the world.
All right, so we've assessed the threat picture, the threat environment. Now let's talk about our capabilities. What has changed about our military and its readiness?
So really, since the end of the Cold War, we have declined our investment. We thought that the Soviet challenge went away, that our military was preeminent, and it was, and in some ways it still is. But we have not updated our weapon systems, for example, across the board in large measure since the 70s, right? So we haven't bought a new major land weapon system since the 70s, it's generations ago. And we don't, in many cases, have projected replacements for it. We're flying aircraft that were designed in the 70s and fielded in the 80s in most cases, and we're training less. And we've got a smaller army and military across the board suffering from the worst recruiting crisis in the history of the all-volunteer force. We missed our goals by 41,000 service members last year alone. And so the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy particularly, we can't man the equipment, which is old enough, in order to meet the threat. And our nuclear inventory isn't faring any better. Our weapon systems designed are very old. Our infrastructure is ancient. Our workforce responsible for building that, 50% are eligible for retirement. And the Chinese threat is increasing apace, and we're not keeping track with that threat, and it's overcoming us.
Well, we're also exhausting our stockpiles of weaponry in the proxy war that we're fighting in Ukraine. So it's that, you know, we've got a lot of weapons that are going out the door, and not quite as many weapons left in our stockpiles, are there?
No, that's exactly right. And we have really been depleting our stockpiles for 30 years, but now the pace has increased. And so we're launching Tomahawk cruise missiles and expensive interceptors against very inexpensive Iranian modified Chinese cruise missiles and drones. And the cost proposition is good for our enemy, but it's terrible for us.
You have assessed, in this report, you've assessed the relative strength of each of the different branches of the military here in the United States. And I don't know if you've got the details in front of you, but to go through all of them. But what I find interesting is that, first of all, unfortunately, you've got the Air Force listed as very weak. That's a tough label to hear for the United States Air Force. How did that happen?
Well, there are really two reasons that impact it. I already mentioned the fact that we've got aging planes. You know, you might drive a 40-year-old car across country, but you probably wouldn't want to fly a 40-year-old plane in enemy-held territory, a hostile environment. But that's what we're doing. Second, we've got fewer service members to man our older equipment. As I said, the recruiting crisis is impacting all services, including the Air Force.
Yes.
And lastly, training, where our aircraft pilots, our fighter pilots in particular, are spending less than 130 hours a year, 130 hours a month training, and they really ought to be north of 150, which was the sort of Cold War standard. And our adversaries are training, you know, north of 170, 180, which is, again, and that's sufficient to maintain your skills. Our pilots, unfortunately, are not keeping up with their skills.
Let me move up from there. The Navy is assessed in your report as weak. Why is that?
Again, we've got too few ships to meet the threat. We can't confront threats in the Middle East, in Europe, and certainly against the Communist Party of China with the number of vessels we have. It's been legislatively mandated to have a certain size fleet. We're not there, and we're not on track to get there. Second, a lot of our fleet is old, and it suffers from maintenance issues. And lastly, the Navy, again, is not exempt with the manpower crisis from the recruiting shortfalls. So we have old platforms, too few sailors to get out there, and not enough to cover the pacing threat for the Chinese. And let me add one other thing. We can't project and sustain our Navy on the other side of the Indo-Pacific. That requires fuel, ammunition, transport, and storage capacity that we not only don't have a plan to reestablish it. And then you add the defense industrial base, which really undercuts the capacity to resurrect this capability across all services.
As you're describing this, it sounds like you're sounding a very loud alarm about the state of our military right now. I want to move to the Army.
Yeah.
You say the Army is considered to be marginal right now, and my understanding is that also has to do with the recruiting problems.
It does. And frankly, the only reason it got marginal and not weak is because the readiness, as reported by the Army, and we don't have the ability to contradict them. And I'm not suggesting they're dishonest in this, but they're reporting that their readiness levels are exceptionally high. And you would hope so coming after 20 years of conflict, but we have too few personnel in our Army. And of the 51 brigade combat teams that we suggest, we're nowhere near meeting that goal. And that was the requirement for quite a while. And now that we're insufficient at meeting it because of the recruiting crisis, we're almost accepting that lower force strike number. And the most recent NDAA basically poured cement around it and suggested that was satisfactory, and it is not.
You also assess that the Space Force, I think even these days, I feel like not a lot of people think about the Space Force all the time, but it's out there thanks to Donald Trump installing the Space Force. You also assess that at this moment that they are marginal.
So they are in the sense that we're not developing capacities apace, but it was successful at consolidating all the disparate responsibilities for space across services. And the United States, fortunately, is still leading the way in launches thanks to SpaceX and commercial programs. So we're still leading. However, the Chinese and others are on track to outpace that in capacity and capability. So we're not going to hold that advantage for much longer.
All right, so let's get to the good news of this report then, at least based on the label. You do have the United States Marine Corps listed as strong. They're the one branch that you assess that way. Why?
So the primary reason is, and it's the smallest of the forces, we have to admit that, they're not suffering as yet from the recruiting crisis the other services are. They're the only ones so far that have made their goals, and I hope they continue to do so. The real reason we assess them as strong is because they've made the decision to adapt the force and make bold decisions to confront the Chinese Communist Party threat and the People's Republic of China, and they're doing it. And so they're on track at a major transformation to adapt their force structure and size to meet that threat. And we judge that they're making progress that can be accelerated, but they're on pace to do it. And again, they're meeting their recruiting goals and retention goals for the moment.
How much, in your assessment, how much is kind of the left-wing ideological meddling disrupting the ability of the military to be both strong and successful?
Well, from our judgment, the impact is absolutely present. And we're getting that anecdotally from service members within and those that separate. And basically, the plot here is that as we place goals, which are quotas, make no mistake, across the services, and particularly the Air Force, on ethnicity and the composition of the officer corps in particular, we're replacing meritocracy as the sole arbiter for promotion and for advancement and for leadership in our armed forces, which is essential for success in combat. And we're replacing it with some other criteria. And every time we've done that in our history, one, we have poor performance, and two, we have trouble keeping people in the armed services, and three, we have trouble getting people to join the armed services. And we're seeing all of that in spades. Now, it's difficult to measure it, to quantify the impact it's having, but we know from service members it's there. And let me add, it's not just the active duty, it's not just the armed forces, it's also the defense industrial base. It's not immune. You know full well that Boeing is under the microscope right now for what happened at Air Alaska and that door and other issues. And the question now is, are we promoting people in the workforce based on something other than skill, other than merit? And the question is, yes, that is being done in companies and corporations. And our judgment, that's impacting things like the F-35 technical upgrade, the TR-3 program, which is a software upgrade for the most part. In our judgment, and based on the information we have, that it's not a supply chain issue, really. It's a coding issue, and it's because Lockheed almost certainly has advanced persons because of some other factor other than skill, merit, and performance.
Also, I know that members of the military, certainly within this audience, have been very concerned about the ideological pressure that they're under while they're working in the military, not just in, and as you point out, the kind of the racial prejudice that's employed in hiring and promoting, but also in the pressure campaign to get a government-mandated jab during the COVID pandemic, or the kind of the like all of this pressure to the extremism stuff. Remember, the Biden administration said that the real problem in the military is all of this right-wing extremism. A report just quietly coming out in December indicating that was a complete lie. There is no massive problem of, quote, right-wing extremism, but it did engender a lot of suspicion amongst the ranks between various members of the military, which is not healthy for a military unit that is supposed to maintain some troop cohesion. These seem like big problems.
Oh, there's no doubt. And they're all symptoms pointing in the same direction, right? So you're forcing service members who are not in any high-risk demographic by any stretch of the imagination, and all the data support the conclusion. And then you're forcing them to get an experimental inoculation, including those that have legitimate reasons and why they have either religious or medical reasons for not getting it, and yet they were separated from the service. And as you rightly point out, we did a massive hunt for the phantom of extremism that we knew that didn't exist in the military ranks. It's always been a point of scrutiny. And so these are indications that there's a priority other than performance. And when you do that, you break the trust between leadership and the led. And it shows up in recruiting. It shows up in retention. It shows up in things like suicide rates, which I'd add to that list of things that are deeply concerning. Our suicide rates for members in active duty and veterans are higher than they've ever been, and they're not going down, they're going up. There's no reason for it. It is inexplicable.
Suicide rates among active duty and veteran are higher than they've ever been at this moment?
They are still climbing. And to be honest with you, there's no rational explanation. You'd expect it, during a period of high intensity deployment, especially we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, but we're on the other side of those deployments right now. And so you have to wonder, what is the stress within the force right now that is causing it? And it's not combat deployments, and it's not recovery from deployments. It's not that stress. So what is it? And we don't have an answer for it, but it's not something that's really being addressed. And it exists not just in active duty, but also in our veteran population. It is a problem, and it is not going away.
I'm sorry that I didn't know that reflexively. I'm glad you told us today. Thank you very much. I'm going to pay attention to that. Rob Greenway with the Heritage Foundation, and an important report on the state of our military. If people in our government care about that, they'll pay attention to this report. Thank you, Rob. Good to talk to you today, sir. And the corruption of our judicial system is just cartoonish at this point. While we were just talking about the state of our military, the news breaking that a jury has said Donald Trump must pay $83 million to E Jean Carroll, the columnist, whose defamation suit against him was funded by Reid Hoffman. The LinkedIn co-founder has been paying for the Nikki Haley campaign in an effort to destroy Donald Trump. $83 million. Help me understand. How do you get $83 million? So if I get defamed, somebody says something that's untrue about me, and I feel like, oh man, that really hurt my earning potential or something, or whatever the case may be, how do you get to $83 million? How does that happen? Did E Jean Carroll have $83 million of work stifled by Donald Trump's statements about her? It's so crazy. And again, all funded by the left, all designed to hurt him and his candidacy. It's the whole game. The whole game is rigged. And so that's the latest on that. And of course, I've already seen lefty. Well, he's a billionaire, so that's nothing to him. I don't know. I mean, are you a thousandaire? Or do you want somebody taking hundreds of dollars from you? I don't know. What do you want? They just want to see him hurt. They derive joy in his pain. And that's demented, honestly. And it's a bad sign for our system. So there you go, $83 million, the big headline-grabbing number today that Trump is ordered to pay to E Jean Carroll. If we get any updates on that story and so many others, we'll share them with you. Coming up, we'll speak to Garrett Ziegler. Speaking of court cases, another lawsuit, this one by Hunter Biden against my next guest for publishing the contents of Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop to the internet. We'll talk to Garrett about that coming up.